feel like my life is really in high definition. It's really quite intense in good and bad ways, so I feel like it's expanded my emotional range. Like, I was on the beach this morning and I was just like, oh my God, like, look where I am, and there are dolphins frolicking in the ocean, and there's a 1,000 birds swooping around this offshore island where we were surfing, and bumped into a bunch of old mates, and caught a wave and had someone hoot me, and
amazing.
I am in paradise. Now. Like, oh my God, like, could life be any better? No, it could not. But then there are long dark nights of the soul that lying awake at 3 a.m. just going, oh fuck, yeah, right, this is my reality.
Hello, beautiful people. On today's podcast, we have the wonderful Tim Baker. Tim is the former editor of Tracks and Surfing Life magazines and a best-selling author, including the books High Surf and Surf Your Life, which he wrote with Mick Fanning. Tim's new book, Patting the Shark, is a story of learning how to live well with metastatic prostate cancer. What I personally love about this conversation is Tim's absolute rawness. We delve into topics that are for most what would be uncomfortable. We discuss the unspoken world of hormone therapy, of chemical castration, the loss of testosterone, a hormone men are built upon, and Tim's experience with the fluidity of identity. We discuss taking an integrative approach to cancer, a partnership of conventional therapy, and the importance of meditation, exercise, diet, and sleep. We explore what quality of life actually means to someone with a terminal illness, and we get into mindset, which is my favorite, on how to make peace with your mortality, stare down your fears, and work out what really matters in life. Please enjoy this conversation with the beautiful Tim Baker. Welcome to the To Be Human podcast, Tim.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm so excited to get into this conversation, Tim. I just finished reading your beautiful recent book, Patting the Shark. What a ride. Excited to get into it on so many levels. And where I want to start is with your beautiful writing. And you shared, what I remember most clearly is my wife squeezing my hand so tight I thought my fingers would break. The last time Kirst nearly crushed my fingers, we were in the same building, though back then the trigger for her vice-like grip was the superhuman effort of bringing new life into the world. This time round, it's the threat of a drastically reduced lifespan for the father of those children she so heroically birthed. Each time, tiny clusters of cells dividing brought us here. So Tim, first and foremost, thank you so much. I mean, honestly, your whole book is just filtered with these beautiful, powerful paragraphs. And so where I would love to start is for you to share more about your life before this really momentous moment of diagnosis. And I know in your book, you kind of describe your life as this starving artist kind of lifestyle that's full of passion.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can remember thinking not long before my diagnosis, God, I just feel like I've had this magic carpet ride through life.
Wow.
I grew up in the landlocked eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and the idea that I'd make my living writing about surfing just seemed so far-fetched.
Yeah.
And I think I remember thinking, I should probably just stop worrying about anything because I feel like life's been so good to me,
Wow.
And
beautiful.
then and I think I even said in the book, I don't feel like life's perfect right now. I don't need any wake-up calls or anything. Just leave everything the way it is. And of course, that's not the way life works. I was a work from home freelance journalist, writing mainly about surfing, 2 beautiful kids, a lovely wife, walking distance to the beach, a crazy dog, 2 cars and a mortgage, the full domestic dream. And I mean, we had our challenges. Yeah, it was a pretty precarious existence financially, but I loved I love what I do. It's the old saying, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And I honestly get excited every day to like open a Word document and continue working on something I'm writing, you know. So yeah, I'd traveled the world. I'd met a lot of my heroes. I'd written books about a few of them.
Yeah.
You know, we'd taken the family around Australia on the great surfing road trip, you know, pulled the kids out of school and hitched up a Jayco and
So cool.
driven the country. So yeah, life was good. You know, this was not, well, I guess it's never part of the plan, but it wasn't even remotely on the radar. And I wasn't someone who ever even thought or worried about cancer or chronic illness. You know, I think surfing and being in the ocean just makes you feel so good.
Yeah.
That you feel a bit bulletproof, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And sort of where I want to go with this, because, you know, I know a big focus of your book is sort of taking this integrative approach to cancer treatment.
Yeah.
And to my understanding, you sort of put like the therapies into two categories. You sort of have the conventional and then more of the supportive. And I kind of want to start with conventional, and sort of some examples that you gave was like, you know, what people are aware of is like chemotherapy, hormone therapy, radiation, and surgery. And the one that really stood out for me, which I actually shared with Tim just before we spoke, because it was really profound for me because I hadn't really heard anything on this, which really bewildered me, was hormone therapy and the effects that it has being on hormone therapy. And there's one sentence in your book, Tim, that just really stood out for me. And you said, "To witness your body hair slowly recede while your genitals gradually shrivel and your breasts enlarge." Now that's a raw statement, Tim. You really like, and it's such a representation of how authentic your book is. And I really admire it because I think it's extremely important to talk about the real shit that's happening in people's lives.
Absolutely.
Can you share more about your experience with hormone therapy, and particularly in relation to sort of it being quite an unspoken experience amongst people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the big shock for me. I mean, I guess the medical specialists, they get a bit sort of desensitized to this stuff. So, you know, I had the appointment with the urologist when, you know, the awful news was delivered. And, you know, that still stands as just, you know, probably the most traumatic day of my life. But they're just very sort of matter of fact and perfunctory, like, okay, we'll get you started on hormone therapy, and then we'll make an appointment with an oncologist, and you can talk to him about chemotherapy, and, you know, here's an information sheet, a brochure, and you sort of sent on your way. And you just kind of left shell-shocked. And then as the reality of what hormone therapy entailed began to dawn on me, I'm like, how come I've never heard this spoken of or written about anywhere? Is this like some dark secret that the medical community keep because they're worried about scaring men off? To be blunt, hormone therapy is essentially chemical castration. So prostate cancer feeds on testosterone. And so what they do is kind of block or suppress your testosterone. And as one doctor said to me, I mean, blokes are basically machines that run on testosterone. So if you collapse a man's testosterone levels, there's all kinds of horrible side effects. And I think part of the reason why it has gone on so long without much sort of discussion is that traditionally prostate cancer was considered an old man's disease. So maybe, you know, the idea of doing that to a more elderly patient population when your natural testosterone levels are in decline seemed less sort of drastic. But, you know, and I talk about this in the book, there has been a sharp sort of uptick in the number of younger men getting prostate cancer, and no one really knows why. But the treatment protocols haven't changed. And so I was 50 when I was diagnosed. My wife was 42.
Wow.
So to be told that this is your reality, complete loss of libido, loss of sexual function. I mean, the drug Zoladex that you put on for hormone therapy is the same drug given to transgender teens who are transitioning from male to female to block the masculinizing effects of puberty. And so, you know, that's the, I guess, the the degree to which it interferes with your sort of natural kind of bodily biochemical reality. It reduces bone density. It increases the risk of heart disease and diabetes. Men on hormone therapy are 4 times more likely to commit suicide.
Yeah, I read that. That's so notable in itself, isn't it?
Yeah. And then the thing I think, that really still makes me angry is that, this treatment is just given to men routinely without much discussion of supportive therapies or how to mitigate the side effects of treatment. And I had to try and figure that all out for myself.
Yeah.
And
why do you think that is? Why do you think there aren't sort of like the supportive networks there to be able to help you get through things like that?
Look, it's a big focus, and I've been working quite closely with the PCFA, the Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia, because they've been really, I guess, pleased that someone is talking and writing about this publicly. So they've been great allies for me. Sorry, what was the original question?
Just why do you think there lacks support networks within it? Because obviously, I mean, it's cancer in itself, no matter what cancer you have, is an enormous change in one's life. But as you're suggesting, when a man is built upon testosterone and then that's sort of taken away from a man, that's also a big change that I think certainly warrants informed professional people to be able to support you through that experience. Yeah.
Oh, look, I think part of it is there's always been this kind of false dichotomy in cancer care between conventional treatments and, alternative or natural therapies. And oncologists sort of guard their turf really jealously because I guess understandably they're worried about their patients going off chasing far-flung, dubious alternative therapies.
Yeah.
But, my argument is, well, take the evidence-based, complementary, supportive lifestyle therapies, whatever you want to call it, bring them inside the oncology tent, the things that actually have an evidence base. And that leaves the sort of snake oil salesman exposed, because all the good stuff has been brought in and things like exercise and diet and meditation and stress reduction and all, medicinal cannabis. I mean, there's lots of things that I think can make that experience kind of less traumatic. But also, as I talk about in the book, oncologists are chronically overworked. They have a really awful health profile themselves, both physical and mental health. And so all they can really do, most general oncologists, you have to deal with every cancer that walks through the door, whether it's lung or prostate or breast.
Yeah.
And so all they really can stay on top of is, the approved protocols for each type of cancer. And I guess to expect them to have their head around things like meditation or nutrition and exercise is maybe expecting too much of them. And I worked that out pretty early on. And so I, with the help of my wife, who's an acupuncturist and, pretty well connected in that world of natural therapies, we were able to sort of assemble our own team.
Beautiful.
I thought, how many men don't have that privilege, don't have the knowledge or don't have...
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know, right? You're relying on someone to inform you.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a generational thing too. I think a lot of older men in particular, they just do what their doctor tells them.
Yeah,
and
of
they don't
course.
question it too much. I remember speaking to an older guy and he just went, just do what your doctor says. That's all you got to do. Just do what your doctor says. And I don't know, I just always had a conviction that there must be things that I can do for myself. And the idea that there isn't, which was the message that I was given, there's nothing you can do. Just all you've got to do is submit to, all these toxic treatments, and that's kind of the best you can hope for.
Right.
Just didn't seem plausible to me.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough too to do a couple of retreats at a place called the Gawler Foundation. Ian Gawler, celebrated cancer survivor. He was the first person to run a cancer support group in Australia, in Melbourne, in about 1981. Was told he had 3 months to live about 35 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, really inspiring guy. And he was just full of wisdom, and he's a slightly controversial figure. You know, some in the medical mainstream don't really approve of what he does, but he's really just trying to empower patients to make informed choices and to actually, you know, I say, you know, I believe in the sort of medical heresy that you can improve your own prognosis through your own efforts. And that that is a controversial thing to say in the world of mainstream oncology, but I just don't think it should be controversial. You know, if you eat well, exercise, meditate, have a sense of meaning and purpose in your life, surely you're going to do better than someone who's sitting on the couch eating fried chicken and watching Netflix all day. You know?
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, this is so relevant to like any of us, right? Whether we have cancer or not. It's like it makes sense that, you know, to feel some form of sense of empowerment in your life and get up and get out there is going to be more worthy, as you're suggesting, than sitting on the couch and doing nothing. And what I really loved, like a theme in your book, is sort of, you know, having cancer is so deeply associated with this like decline in quality of life, basically. Whereas like with you, you're so passionate at just like really like bringing that like quality of life up as much as possible. And as you've shared, it's through these supportive therapies. And I love you sort of refer to it as like take your meds, but meds sort of stands for, I think, medication, exercise, diet, and sleep.
Yeah, meditation.
Yeah. Can you share more about that, Tim? Because I think, you know, what I'm interested in is like, is this just purely to enhance your quality of life? Or as you're suggesting through these sort of evidence-based research, is it also helping with the progression of your life?
Yeah. Well, I think the answer is both. And like, I'm not a doctor, and I always preface everything I say with the fact that I'm not a doctor. I don't want to be giving unqualified medical advice, but, you know, I am a journalist and I have done a lot of research, and I mean, it takes 7 years to get a medical degree. I've been living with prostate cancer for 7 years. I think I probably know more than some oncologists about the experience of living with prostate cancer. And there is, if, you know, my oncologist said to me, literally, it doesn't make any difference what you eat. And this is a verbatim quote. It doesn't matter if you're eating organic fruit and vegetables or Hungry Jacks or cardboard, your body just turns it all into glucose anyway. So it makes no difference.
Fascinating.
And at that point, I was just kind of dumbstruck. I was like, okay, so I'm not going to go to my oncologist for advice. We'll get that clear right from the start.
Yeah, don't start eating cardboard.
Because that's just ignorance. Like the research is there in favor of a plant-based diet, and there are all kinds of diets, and you'll hear all sorts of conflicting opinions on a ketogenic diet, or you know, vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, you know, the Mediterranean. I like the term plant-based because it is a bit fluid. You know, you can sort of interpret it the way you like. And I think, you know, you've still got to enjoy life. And I didn't want to have a life of just complete deprivation, you know.
Absolutely.
So I think for the first few years, I was super strict with diet. But, you know, you can look at the research and you can see the studies that say a predominantly plant-based diet has an anti-cancer benefit. And it's pretty clear cut. And I don't understand why the medical mainstream don't acknowledge that more clearly. You know, there are integrative oncologists around, and I've been to a conference on integrative oncology, and these are medical doctors, highly qualified, but within their own medical communities, they're considered mavericks. And so, you know, they come together and have these conferences to discuss ideas that, you know, they shouldn't, as I said, they kind of shouldn't be controversial, you know. The evidence around exercise in particular is stunning, you know, that it can increase your survival times really dramatically, and it does have an anti-cancer effect. And, you know, I can't explain the complete biochemical process by which that happens, but I know how it feels. I know when I have this vibration of health and vitality all through my body from exercising, that I just feel like, and I think I say in the book, it just feels like there's no room for disease. Like, And so I guess that's what I'm really passionate about is, people need to be given the message that you can improve your quality of life and you can even improve your prognosis.
And talk to me about meditation. How does this kind of play into both sort of quality of life and prognosis?
Yeah. Well, I mean, on one level, it just helps you deal with the stress and anxiety.
Right.
You know, I meditated a bit before my diagnosis. I'd done a Vipassana meditation retreat, as I talk about in the book, when my wife was pregnant with our first child. And then it was sort of my preparation for parenthood, and feeling anxious about being a freelance writer, supporting a family. And, 15 years later, I went to my second Vipassana retreat as a cancer patient. And for then it was just about being able to sleep well the night before test results and just being able to find that place of peace and stillness and being able to quieten, all those cycling anxieties. And I realized that, I was sleeping well the night before test results. I'd forget that I had an oncologist appointment the next day when I'd get test results. It just wasn't, this gnawing anxiety that was always there, because I knew I could just drop into this place of peace and stillness. And I think meditation gets sort of overly complicated for people. And some people kind of go, oh, that meditation's not for me. It's very, very simple practice. It's just learning to quieten your mind and not, there's a great saying that, the mind is a wonderful tool, but it makes a lousy boss. And I think that's really true. You don't, the mind can do amazing things, but you don't really want it running the show.
Right.
You don't want the monkey mind jumping around, leading you in all different directions. You need to be the witness or the observer to your mind to go, oh, look, here I go again, playing out all these, doomsday scenarios or catastrophizing or, obsessing over something that happened in the past or worrying about something coming up in the future, and having the ability to just still that, that monkey mind and just drop into a sense of, and it's difficult to articulate because the intellectual mind isn't operating when you're in a meditative state, but it's just a place of stillness and kind of emptiness. And I've had some really powerful experiences, particularly during those Vipassana meditation retreats, where I've tapped into something that feels, just timeless and effortless.
Wow, beautiful.
Deeply, deeply healing. And then, on an evidence base, the stress hormone cortisol is terrible for cancer patients. It can feed cancer and accelerate the progression of cancer. So if you have the tools to, reduce stress and reduce the production of cortisol in your system, then you're doing yourself a really big favor on a sort of biochemical level as well.
Yeah, I'm really, because one of the questions I sort of had for you was like, I'm so intrigued in like, how do you live a life with so much uncertainty? Because I mean, we can really pan this out to the big picture and we all live in a life of uncertainty, but it is kind of different when you get a prognosis.
Sure.
Is it meditation that you really come back to, or is there sort of like things that you say to yourself as well? Like, how do you sort of deal with that level of uncertainty day to day?
Yeah, I think the big turning point for me, and I talk about this in the book too, was when my focus became not so much on survival, but rather on making my peace with my mortality. Because, a lot of this is out of my control. I can be as diligent and disciplined as possible, but, there are people who've done that and they've still, succumbed to their cancer. And, I think what we all need to do, and, what Buddhism teaches, is that our life's work is to prepare for death.
Right.
And if the worst thing that can happen is that I die and I'm okay with that, then I'm okay.
Yeah, right.
And so I would meditate on death. I would just feel into what might that be like. And I remember at one of those Gawler Foundation retreats, I met this young guy, Eddie, who I could just tell from his physique had been a surfer and he'd been a skateboarder. He still had that sort of fit physique, even though he was ravaged by this chemotherapy that had produced all these sort of angry pockmarks all over his body. And he had a bag. He had, I think, stomach cancer. And he said something to me like, I think death's going to be really interesting. I'm super curious about it. And, this was a guy whose prognosis was, worse than mine. And his treatments had obviously just, ravaged his body, his physical body. But he was the most Zen meditator I'd ever seen, And we'd finish a meditation session at those retreats and everyone would sort of file out and go, "Oh, thank God that's over. I can move." And he'd just still be there, just kind of off in another dimension, like he hadn't even registered that the session finished. And that really made an impact on me. And, I say in the book that, making our peace with our mortality is kind of like the homework that we all put off until the last minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a cancer diagnosis is a kind of wake-up call to do your homework. And so I think of the book, a lot of it as sort of me doing my homework, you know. And I wouldn't say I'm there, but I'm sort of much closer to being at peace with my mortality than I was at the start of this. And I don't know, it just doesn't freak me out as much. Like, I want to hang around as long as possible.
Yeah.
But we're all going to die. And even, it's a funny thing through the whole sort of COVID pandemic. I kind of thought when the whole world was freaking out, I would just, and not in a smug way or anything, but I just had this thought of like, "Oh yes, welcome to my world." Yeah. Because it is an insecure existence on this orb that's spinning through space, know. And nothing can be taken for granted. I read a fantastic book called When Things Fall Apart by an American Buddhist teacher named Pema Chodron. And she says in that book, we're all looking for solid ground to kind of feel secure. And the truth is there is no solid ground.
Yeah.
And when we can accept that, it's just kind of liberating.
Yes. I completely relate to you, because it's certainly in my own personal life, I've been doing that with things. And I think, is this part of the lesson that you learned, is to like, when you place so much energy into that fear, it really dominates and controls your life. But when you're able to face it and really sit with it and, over time be able to accept it, and almost like your friend also to get curious about it, it just changes the whole relationship with everything, and it's no longer dominating your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as a society, we just don't do death very well.
We don't.
We don't see dead bodies. Someone in our life dies and we very quickly kind of call in the professionals and they deal with everything, so we don't have to see any of the sort of unpleasantness. Whereas, a lot of cultures, Maori culture or, lots of traditional cultures, the body will be laid out and people will sit with it and spend time with their loved one. And, another thing that really made a big impact on me was a friend of mine was talking about the death of their father. And they said that he was so at peace that he was calling in each sort of family member individually just to spend some one-on-one time with them, and was sort of comforting and consoling every member of his family, like, "I'm okay, don't worry, life goes on, this is going to be okay." And rather than requiring, your loved ones to comfort you. Yeah. I thought, well, that's what I would wish for. I would wish to be that figure who can comfort the people around me rather than be the one needing comfort.
Yeah.
And, my mother-in-law died of cancer a couple of years before my diagnosis. And I watched my wife grieve for her mother, and then 2 months later I was diagnosed. So it was just grief on top of grief, and it was so stressful for everyone. And I just thought, I can't put my family through something like that. I have to be able to comfort them. And that's been a big sort of driving sort of motivation for me, I think.
And that's a pretty powerful place to be. But I assume sort of throughout your experience, it must sort of ebb and flow within that. Is that sort of what happens? Is like, you know, some days you're feeling really powerful and stable and you're sort of the rock, and then the next day you're like, okay, it's a little much today.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, I've been a mess many times, and
Yeah.
I've tried to be really real about that in the book too. And that's also another one of the awful side effects of hormone therapy, is that you have a sort of inability to kind of regulate your emotions sometimes. And so there were days when I would just fall apart and just feel like, oh my God, like, how is this my life? How has it come to this? Someone's made a mistake, surely.
Yeah.
But I think I've learned over time to sort of let those feelings kind of move through me. And I got a yoga teacher who I would see for sort of counselling and a bit of a sort of relaxation practice. And he used to say something about, you know, letting feelings move through you, but just don't give them somewhere to land. Nice. And I think there's something in that. So you can recognize, you know, grief or trauma or, you know, upset of any kind, but you don't kind of have to grab onto it and identify with it and for it to somehow become your identity.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I think meditation allows us to do that as well. You can just observe the feelings coming through your body, like, oh, here we go, I'm having one of those days, and just sit with it. And I think that's probably maybe one of the great benefits of the experience I've been through is I talk about, you know, it's like passing through this furnace of knowledge, you know, and you come out the other side like a tempered steel, you know, you're stronger but more malleable or something.
Beautiful.
And so I've really tried to cultivate that ability to sit with uncomfortable feelings and not have to do anything about them. There's another great book I'm reading at the moment called The Untethered Soul, and I just can't recall.
Michael Singer.
Yeah.
Beautiful book.
And when he just talks about, you know, your thoughts don't really matter, you know, like the world, and, you know, the world goes on regardless of your thoughts. And I thought, there's kind of a relief in that, you know, like I'll just let my thoughts kind of play out, you know, and you find that, you know, as the Buddha says, you know, everything arises to pass away. You can observe these feelings arise and you can observe them pass away. And then you come through them and go, well, that didn't kill me, you know. Right. And there's probably a surfing metaphor there too, you know, like I kind of think of, you know, paddling out in big surf and, you know, you have a couple of wipeouts and you pop up and you get a breath full of air and kind of go, oh, I'm still here, I'm still alive. That, you know, and the worst thing you can do is panic and use up all your oxygen too quickly. If you just kind of go with it and go through all that turbulence and just try and maintain some sort of inner calm, then you're just going to deal with the situation better.
Yeah.
But that's been a big focus too.
And you, as you shared earlier, also sort of went into the area of psychedelic substances. And there was one line in your book that I'm just super curious about, sort of in relation to this. You said, I don't even know who I am anymore. So I'd love to sort of explore that with you, Tim. What does that sort of mean coming on the, sort of the outside of those experiences? Yeah.
I mean, there's a few things that sort of feed into that. I mean, one is, you know, the effects of hormone therapy were so dramatic and so devastating that even trying to hang on to my old identity felt too painful. And I just had to let go of it and not try and be Tim before he had cancer.
Yeah.
And so I was just becoming something else. And I talk about in the book too, sort of feeling like, well, I almost feel kind of non-binary, you know. Wow. It's an odd thing to say, but that was something I kind of learned from, you know, my daughter and her generation, who are so comfortable with the idea of gender fluidity, that as men, you know, the idea of chemical castration is so confronting and so, such a threat to our sense of manhood and masculinity that I just had to let it go. And I'm just like, well, I don't know what I am. I'm just free. And
I
there
mean,
was
do you feel like it matters? Like at this stage in your life?
well, I mean, it's it matters, I guess, to my marriage, my relationship. That's probably been the hardest element of it. In terms of my own identity, I still can't pretend it's easy, because it's still hard, and there's a lack of energy, and there's a sort of fatigue and lethargy I experience that just interferes with day-to-day living.
Yeah.
But I just have learned to be quite gentle with myself and what I can get done in a day and what I expect of myself. And the fact that I'm still surfing, the fact that I can paddle out into the ocean,
amazing,
and catch a wave, is just such a source of solace and comfort, and kind of, I guess it's a thread that keeps me connected to my old self as well. And it's also just amazing therapy. It ticks so many of the boxes of things that are good for me. It's a cardio workout. It's getting lost in something greater than the self. It's quite meditative, just sitting out in the ocean, staring out to the horizon. So in so many ways, surfing has kind of been the perfect therapy for me. But I am a different person than I was before. It's changed me profoundly, and not always for the worst. It's redesigned my life in ways that are quite sort of magical. They talk about cancer kind of being a superpower, that not much else can hurt you when you're living with that sort of existential threat. And so I really would like to try and recast our whole societal sort of view of cancer and approach to cancer. And I'm doing it. I wrote the book as part of a creative writing PhD, and I'm now working on the sort of academic paper, which is about, I've called it Towards a New Language of Cancer, and just wanting to change the conversation and, get away from that sort of battle language, the war on cancer, and that everyone who dies of cancer dies after a battle of X number of years. Just finding new ways to frame it that is full of less kind of dread, and that requires making peace with your mortality, because if you make your peace with your mortality, then it doesn't have the same power. And that, in a weird kind of way, I guess, as a writer who's really interested in language and words, I want to rob that word cancer of some of its power.
I feel like this, it reminds me, in your book you sort of mentioned Bruce Lipton's work around sort of thoughts influence or affect our physiology. How much do you sort of integrate that into your life?
It's a tricky one, because I think, you could take that to an extreme and forego conventional therapy treatments and think you're just going to meditate your tumor away. And maybe some people do, but a lot of people try and fail. So, I don't sort of advocate that. But, I can't prove this, but for me, there was power in just trying to live in a place that felt like I was healing. And it's difficult to articulate, but just lying in bed at night, just trying to let go of everything. I mean, I've got this great physiotherapist who I see for Pilates, and I remember one day I was saying to her, "Oh, look, I'm getting a lot of sensation in this leg where I had a tumor initially. When I was diagnosed, my right femur thigh bone was full of cancer, and it's since cleared up and never come back, which is quite amazing. But I said, look, I still get some sensations in this leg that it's the cancer coming back." And she said, "You just need to turn that thinking around and, think of those sensations as a kind of healing." And it's also something that Vipassana meditation teaches, that sensation is that in the body is the cells just rebalancing and reorganizing to a healthy state. So I think through practice, and particularly meditation, I was able to just observe those sensations and convince myself that that was a healing energy. It wasn't cancer spread,
Yeah.
And it feels like it helped, Like I haven't run clinical trials on it.
You should.
There's no control group, but that's just a sample of one. But it's worked for me, and it's just made life more bearable as well, rather than lying in bed going, "Oh my God, there's a sensation somewhere in my body. What's going on?" Let that energy move through your body. A bit like the thoughts. Just let it flow.
Beautiful. And sort of around, I guess, mindset and longevity, you share that sort of it's been proven that having strong reasons to live and a powerful sense of purpose improves outcomes for cancer patients, and I would probably argue anybody.
Totally.
What is sort of what gives you sort of this powerful sense of purpose?
Well, I feel very lucky as a writer to have writing as a way of processing my experiences. And so at the moment, it is, I guess, through the book advocating for change. I really want to see meaningful change in the healthcare system that recognises the value of all these kind of supportive therapies. So that's a huge motivation. And just family, my children, wanting to be around for as long as possible, but also just to be a good person. And I guess I'm not interested so much in framing myself as a miraculous cancer survivor. I'm more interested in that business of, making my peace with my mortality, because it feels like, that is a quest that's entirely within my own control. That's something I can work on every day. And I can choose to stop and sit and meditate and be still at any point in any day and access that place of peace and stillness. And then, I guess just waking up each day and trying to do things that bring me joy, whether that's surfing or music or writing or spending time with family and friends. And, it's a bit of a cliche that, when you get a sort of wake up call like this, you sort of cherish every small thing.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to ask, sort of when you're in this experience, is that something that's on your mind to, really appreciate every moment, or is there kind of like an ebb and flow of it? Because obviously you still sort of need to live your day-to-day life.
Yeah, there's definitely an ebb and flow. And I think towards the end of the book, I talk about the concept of quality of life. And I'd have to fill out these questionnaires for various studies that I've been a part of. And in a medical sense, when they talk about quality of its life, it's like, can you shower yourself? Can you dress yourself? Do you have pain anywhere in your body? And, all these really sort of quite practical, pragmatic things. But I said, I feel like when I think about quality of life, I feel like the term high definition comes to mind. Like I feel like my life is really in high definition. It's really quite intense in good and bad ways, so I feel like it's expanded my emotional range. Like I was on the beach this morning and I was just like, oh my God, like look where I am, and there are dolphins frolicking in the ocean, and there's a 1,000 birds swooping around this offshore island where we were surfing, and bumped into a bunch of old mates and, caught a wave and had someone hoot me. And
amazing.
I am in paradise. Now. Like, oh my God, like, could life be any better? No, it could not. But then, there are long, dark nights of the soul that lying awake at 3 a.m. just going, oh, fuck. Yeah, right. This is my reality.
Yeah.
And so, again, being a surfing writer, there's this occupational hazard of just using surfing metaphors for everything. No, but it is kind of like just like riding the peaks and troughs, and
Yeah.
you know that one day the surf's beautiful and offshore and gleaming, and the next day it can be just a washing machine, and
Yeah.
the tide goes in and out, and the swell comes up and goes down, and weather patterns swirl offshore, and we live in a state of flux. Everything changes, and there is no solid ground, and you just keep rolling with it. And
beautiful.
And these gleaming moments bob up and present themselves from time to time, and you just suck the marrow from them, and that sustains you through the tough times.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to sort of leave the listeners on a little piece of wisdom, and I think this is for whether someone has a prognosis or not. And I think the biggest one one of the biggest ones from our conversation is really leaning into this idea of starting to find peace with our own mortality. I think we can all certainly learn from you on that one. What is sort of another piece of wisdom that the listeners can sort of take away with them?
Wow. Gosh, I'm going to...
Don't overthink, go with the gut.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think what pops into my head. Sorry, I'm drawing a bit of a blank. But, life is an adventure, and there are no guarantees, and we can't just choose safety, Again, Pema Chodron says, really being truly alive is to be thrown out of the nest repeatedly.
Wow.
And I can kind of really relate to that. When life feels really fragile and precarious, you're in the fullness of life, and don't shrink away from those experiences, when you feel, I guess, your sense of self is under threat. And I think we all do that. We have a strong sense of self that we defend. And when you kind of surrender to that, you don't need to protect that individual identity. We're all connected, and, our egos get in the way of true human connection. And when you sort of just see yourself as one small part of a great human family, I think your individual circumstances just sort of seem less critical. So, there's 7 billion people on the planet. I'm one of them who happens to have a cancer diagnosis. It's not front page news, and, we're all just trying to muddle our way through. And
muddle's a good word.
None of us have all the answers. And today was a good day, and I'll celebrate that. And I'll roll with the challenges that may lie ahead.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you so much for this beautiful book, beautiful conversation. You have just provided so much wisdom and gifts, and it's just been, I'm grateful to have connected with you. It's just been lovely to really lean into your story and get to know you on a deeper level, and just really, I guess, start integrating the profound wisdom that you've shared into my life. So I want to thank you personally for that.
Oh, that means a great deal to me. Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's why I've written the book. And if people can draw something from it, then I feel like I've done my
many
job.
things, Tim. A lot of aha moments in there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for your thoughtful questions.
You're welcome. So on a final note, Tim, I would love to ask you, what does it mean to you to be human?
I guess it is to be vulnerable. We are just this sort of, I heard someone describe us as, just like a sausage skin full of meat and bone and organ, and, the idea that
a meat suit.
Some great sort of control over our lives is a bit of an illusion. And to sort of embrace that vulnerability and fragility, because it also can be the source of great joy. When you kind of open yourself up to experiences. And every time I put myself in a situation that feels uncomfortable, even in the writing of the book, I would just go, this feels really uncomfortable. Well, that means I have to write this, you know,
Love it.
just right into the discomfort. And I guess you can live that way too, not just sort of shrink back from discomfort or things that are confronting. Just own your vulnerability, I suppose.
Yeah.